My name is Samantha, I'm 23 years old, and I swear to God, if someone told me a year ago that my own father would betray me the way he did, I would have laughed in their face. I always thought family was supposed to be your safety net, the one group of people you could count on no matter what. But that illusion shattered the night I found out $30,000, money I had worked and saved for nearly 6 years, was gone. I remember the exact moment. It was late, around midnight, and I had just finished another long shift at the diner where I worked while finishing up my degree in accounting. I logged into my bank account, planning to transfer a little money into my emergency fund, when I noticed the balance, $317. The number didn't even make sense. At first, I thought maybe it was some kind of banking error. My savings had been sitting strong at just over $30,000, a combination of babysitting jobs in high school, scholarships I carefully budgeted, and endless hours of double shifts at the diner. The next morning, I confronted my dad in the kitchen. He was sitting at the table with a mug of coffee like it was just another ordinary day. "Dad," I said, my voice shaking, "where's my money?" He didn't even look guilty. He just sighed like I was bothering him and said, "I used it." "Used it? For what?" "Your sister needed a car, Samantha. She starts college next month." What was I supposed to do? Let her walk to campus? My blood ran cold. My younger sister, Kelly, had always been the golden child, the one who never heard the word no. I stared at him, my chest burning, and finally managed, "That was my money. You had no right." That's when he stood up, towering over me. Before I could say another word, he slapped me across the face. The sting burned, but what hurt more was the realization, this wasn't just about money. It was about control. And in that moment, something inside me broke. Or maybe it woke up. Because right then, I knew one thing for certain, he was going to regret ever underestimating me. After that slap, I locked myself in my room for hours, pressing a cold water bottle against my cheek and replaying the scene over and over. My father had stolen from me. Not borrowed. Not asked. Stolen. And then, instead of apologizing, he hit me like I was some disobedient child. I lay awake most of that night staring at the ceiling. Anger buzzed inside me like static electricity, but beneath it was something else, clarity. For years, I had watched my parents bend over backward for Kelly while I carried the weight of being the responsible one. I bought my own clothes, paid my way through school, even chipped in for groceries when times got tough. Meanwhile, Kelly got her first iPhone at 16, brand new clothes every season, and now, a car paid for with my blood and sweat. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen. My mom sat at the table, sipping coffee like always, pretending not to notice the bruise on my cheek. Kelly jingled the new car keys in her hand, grinning like a queen. My dad didn't look at me at all. "So, Sam," Kelly said, flipping her hair, "what do you think of my new ride? Cute, right?" I forced a smile. "Yeah. Real cute." But inside, my mind was working fast. If they thought they'd broken me, they were wrong. Over the next couple of weeks, I started observing more closely. My dad's business, he ran a small contracting company, wasn't doing as well as he pretended. Bills piled up on the counter, unopened. Collection calls came almost daily. He'd snap at them, telling them it was handled, but the truth was obvious, they were drowning in debt. Kelly, of course, had no clue. She thought our parents were just being stingy whenever she asked for more. I started to put pieces together. They had taken my money because they were desperate. My dad probably figured I'd forgive him eventually. Maybe even forget. But I don't forgive thieves. And I definitely don't forget betrayal. One evening, I overheard a phone call that made my stomach tighten with a mix of fear and satisfaction. My dad's voice was low and tense. "No, I don't have it yet. I'll get it, just give me more time." Whoever was on the other end wasn't convinced. That's when the idea came to me. If my family wanted to treat me like an outsider, fine. But I was going to use every ounce of intelligence, patience, and grit I had to make sure they paid for what they did to me. And the best part? I wouldn't even have to lift a finger against them. They were already destroying themselves. All I had to do was wait and plan. I didn't rush my revenge. That was the first rule I set for myself. If I wanted this to work, I had to be smart, methodical. My dad thought of me as the good daughter, the one who never caused trouble. I was going to use that to my advantage. I started small, quietly keeping track of everything I could about his business and finances. He kept his office door half closed most of the time, but I'd catch glimpses of folders stacked in piles, receipts scattered like confetti, and overdue notices stuffed into drawers. When he wasn't home, I'd slip in, pretending to grab laundry or dust and snap quick photos with my phone. Tax documents, bank statements, even letters from creditors. It didn't take long to see the bigger picture. His company wasn't just struggling, it was sinking. Thousands owed to suppliers, loans he hadn't paid down, and an IRS letter that nearly made me laugh out loud. He wasn't the strong provider he always pretended to be. He was a man hanging by a thread. The funniest part? My $30,000 hadn't even gone entirely to Kelly's car. Sure, they bought her a shiny little Honda Civic, but the rest? He'd used it to cover overdue bills, just trying to keep the lights on. That slap, that smug look in his eyes when he justified it, all of it was built on desperation. Meanwhile, I played my role. I went to work, came home, stayed quiet at the dinner table. Kelly flaunted her new car constantly, offering me rides with that smug little smirk. Mom avoided eye contact like always. Dad acted like nothing had happened, though sometimes I caught him staring at me, like he was waiting for me to explode. But I didn't. Instead, I started laying down the foundation. I transferred the few $100s I had left into a new account my parents didn't know about. I opened a secret savings folder, tucking away every tip, every extra bit of cash. I wasn't going to let them drain me again. At the same time, I started keeping a written log of everything, the calls from creditors, the dates overdue bills arrived, even snippets of conversations I overheard. My dad was sloppy, careless. And sooner or later, someone outside the family was going to notice. But here's the thing, when his empire finally collapsed, I wasn't just going to sit back and watch. No, I was going to make sure I came out on top, with every secret of his failure ready to burn him if he dared to drag me down with him. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about respect. The first real crack in my dad's armor came on a Thursday night. He had been in his office all evening, pacing, slamming drawers, muttering to himself. I was in the hallway pretending to fold laundry when I heard his voice spike, loud, angry. "I told you I'll get it to you." He barked into the phone. "Don't threaten me in my own house." That caught my attention. He never raised his voice when talking business. I leaned closer, my heart pounding. A pause. Then his voice dropped, low and strained. "Fine. But you're not getting it this week. I don't have it." Another pause, and then the words that lit a fire inside me. "If you don't back off, I'll file for bankruptcy. You'll get nothing. Do you understand? Bankruptcy." I nearly smiled. Later that night, when he finally went to bed, he left his office door cracked open. The desk light was still on, papers scattered like a hurricane had hit. My gut told me this was my moment. I slipped inside, moving fast but careful. And there it was, an official bankruptcy packet sitting right on top of the desk, half filled out. I took a quick set of photos with my phone, my hands steady despite the adrenaline rushing through me. This wasn't just evidence of his financial mess anymore. This was leverage. The next morning, I acted normal. Kelly pranced around bragging about a shopping trip she wanted to take, completely oblivious. My mom sat in silence, eyes on her coffee cup. Dad barely looked at me, but I could see the tension in his jaw. He was unraveling, piece by piece. That's when I realized, he thought I was still in the dark. He thought I was just licking my wounds after what happened weeks ago. Good. Let him believe that. Because now I had something powerful, proof that his perfect little image was collapsing. Proof that I could use when the timing was right. And the timing would come. I didn't know when or how yet, but I swore to myself that when his downfall finally arrived, I'd be standing there, holding the match. I decided the best way to start was small. Subtle. If I pushed too hard, too fast, my dad would get suspicious. But if I planted just the right seeds of doubt in his mind, he'd unravel on his own. The first chance came one Saturday morning. He was sitting at the table with his coffee, flipping through the mail. I poured myself some orange juice and said casually, "Hey, Dad, I heard something interesting at work last night." He didn't look up. "Yeah?" "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone light. "One of the guys I serve at the diner works for a law office downtown. He said they've been getting a lot of bankruptcy filings lately. Guess people are drowning in debt more than they admit." The mail in his hands froze for just a second. Then he forced a laugh. "That's so?" Hum. I sipped my juice and walked away like it was nothing. That little pause told me everything. He was scared. Over the next few days, I dropped more comments, always disguised as idle conversation. "Hey Dad, did you know bankruptcy filings are public record?" Or, "I read somewhere that if a business can't pay its suppliers, the owners can be held personally liable." Crazy, right? Each time, I'd catch the tiniest flicker in his eyes, fear, frustration, maybe even guilt. But he never said a word to me about it. Meanwhile, I kept collecting. I dug through the trash one night and found a crumpled letter from a supplier demanding payment. Another time, I overheard him arguing with my mom behind closed doors about losing the house. I wrote everything down, saved every photo, every scrap of evidence. Kelly, of course, remained blissfully clueless. She drove her new car everywhere, bragging to her friends about how Daddy bought it for her. Watching her flaunt something that had been ripped from me only made my resolve sharper. The truth was, I didn't even have to take him down myself. His own mistakes were going to do that for me. But when he finally fell, I wasn't just going to stand aside and watch. I was going to make sure he knew exactly why he was on the ground. And when that moment came, I wanted him to remember one thing. It was me who set it in motion. It was about 3 weeks later when the desperation started to show. My dad had always been the kind of man who puffed out his chest, pretending he was in control of everything. But now? He was cracking. One night I came home from the diner and found him sitting in the living room in the dark, just staring at the TV screen with a beer in his hand. The channels weren't even changing. He didn't notice me at first, and when he finally did, he jumped like I'd caught him doing something wrong. "You're home late," he muttered. His voice was heavy, tired. "Double shift," I said simply, dropping my bag by the door. Then I added, "Gotta save what I can, right?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. Later that night, when he finally stumbled into bed, I slipped into his office. That's when I found it, the mistake I'd been waiting for. On his desk sat an envelope, half open. Inside was a notice from the bank. Our house was officially in pre-foreclosure. My stomach twisted, not with fear, but with something sharper, satisfaction. This was it. The clock was ticking, and he couldn't stop it. The next morning, I tested the waters. While Kelly bragged about her upcoming weekend trip with her friends, I said, almost innocently, "I wonder what'll happen if the bank takes the house. Do they let you stay, or do you just pack up and go?" The room went silent. My mom froze with her spoon halfway to her mouth. My dad's face darkened instantly. "Where'd you hear that?" he snapped. I shrugged. "Just something I read online." His reaction told me everything. He was terrified someone might find out the truth. Terrified that his perfect image of being the strong provider, the man in control, was about to shatter. That's when I knew I had him exactly where I wanted him. Because the thing about desperate men? They make sloppy choices. And all I had to do was wait for him to trip over his own lies. The shady moment came sooner than I expected. It was a Tuesday night, just after 9 p.m. I'd gotten off work early and decided to walk home instead of catching a ride. When I turned onto our street, I noticed a car parked outside our house, a black SUV with tinted windows. It wasn't anyone I recognized. Through the living room window, I could see my dad pacing, his hands flying as he talked. Curious, I slowed my steps, staying in the shadows by the trees. A tall man in a leather jacket stepped out of the SUV and walked up to the door. My dad opened it quickly and let him in. I crept closer until I could hear muffled voices through the thin walls. "You're already 2 months late," the man said sharply. His voice carried enough to make my skin prickle. "You promised payment. Where is it?" My dad's tone was lower, pleading. "I told you, I just need more time. Work's been slow." "That's not my problem," the man snapped. "You borrowed from me. You pay me back, or I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are." My heart pounded. Borrowed? From this guy? My dad wasn't just behind on bills, he was taking shady loans to keep himself afloat. I didn't move until the man finally stormed out and drove away. My dad stood in the doorway, rubbing his face like the weight of the world was crushing him. For a second, he looked older, smaller. But I didn't feel pity. Not anymore. Later that night, while everyone slept, I slipped back into his office. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for, an agreement written on cheap letterhead, signed by my dad. It wasn't from a bank. It was from a private lender, the kind of loan shark desperate people crawl to when they've run out of options. I took photos of everything. Every line, every signature. My hands shook, not from fear, but from excitement. This was it, the weapon I'd been waiting for. Because now I didn't just have proof of his financial ruin. I had evidence of something much darker, something that could bury his reputation completely if I wanted it to. And the best part? He had no idea I was holding it. For the first time since my money disappeared, I felt like I had control again. The photos of that loan agreement burned like dynamite in my phone, dangerous, powerful, waiting for the right moment. But I couldn't be reckless. If I wanted my revenge to hit where it hurt most, I had to play my cards carefully. So, I started testing the waters. At breakfast a few days later, I sat across from my dad while Kelly scrolled through her phone, bragging about some concert she wanted to go to. My mom stayed quiet as usual, buttering toast like the world wasn't falling apart around her. I looked up from my cereal and said casually, "You know what's funny? My economics professor mentioned something the other day, how private loans can ruin people faster than bank debt. He said it's because loan sharks don't really care about rules. They care about collecting." The spoon froze halfway to my dad's mouth. He didn't even breathe for a second. Then he forced a laugh that didn't quite land. "Your professor watches too many movies." "Maybe," I said with a shrug, pretending to focus on my bowl. But I didn't miss the way his hand trembled slightly as he set his spoon down. That same day, I slipped another little comment into the conversation. "Oh, and apparently, if someone defaults on a private loan, it can end up in court. Public record, just like bankruptcy." This time he snapped. "Where are you getting this crap?" His voice was sharp, angry, but I caught something else in it, fear. I stared at him for a moment, my expression calm, steady. Then I just said, "Just stuff I've been reading. Don't worry about it." That night, I heard him pacing in his office again, muttering under his breath. I smiled to myself in the dark of my room. My hints were working. He didn't know what I knew, but the not knowing was eating him alive. The power dynamic was shifting, and he could feel it. And me? I was just getting started. The time for subtle hints was over. My dad was cracking, and I wanted to make sure he knew exactly who was holding the hammer. One evening, I walked into the kitchen while he was sitting alone at the table, staring at a stack of unopened mail. His face was pale, his eyes sunken. He looked like a man running out of rope. Perfect. I set my phone down on the table, screen face up. One of the photos of the loan agreement was pulled up. His signature clear as day. I didn't say a word at first. I just poured myself a glass of water, sat across from him, and let the silence stretch. Finally, his eyes flicked down to the screen. He froze. "What is that?" he asked, his voice tight. I took a slow sip. "Looks like paperwork. Important paperwork." His face went red. "Where did you get that?" I leaned back in my chair, meeting his eyes evenly. "Does it matter?" For a moment, I thought he was going to explode. His jaw clenched, his fists balled on the table. But then, just like that, he deflated. He rubbed his face and muttered, "You don't understand what you're messing with, Samantha." "Oh, I understand," I said calmly. "You stole from me $30,000 that I worked for, that you had no right to touch. And now I know exactly how deep your hole goes. Bankruptcy. Loan sharks. The house. Everything." He slammed his hand on the table. "Keep your damn mouth shut." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Or what? You'll hit me again?" The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. His eyes burned into mine, but I didn't flinch. For the first time in my life, I saw it, fear. Not mine. His. I stood up, grabbed my phone, and walked toward the door. Just before leaving, I glanced back and said, "You should be careful, Dad. Secrets have a way of coming out." Then I left him sitting there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. That night, lying in bed, I smiled to myself. I hadn't even played my full hand yet, but he already knew. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. And that shift in power? That was the beginning of his downfall. Once my dad saw that photo, something changed between us. He avoided me as much as possible, no longer barking orders or pretending he was in control. But I knew better. Silence doesn't mean peace. It means strategy. And if he was planning his next move, I needed to be 10 steps ahead. That's when I decided my revenge couldn't stay inside the walls of our house. If he thought he could steal from me and slap me into silence, he was wrong. I wasn't just going to make him squirm, I was going to make him watch everything he built crumble, piece by piece. The first step was insurance. I created a hidden folder online and uploaded every photo, every log, every scrap of evidence I had. The bankruptcy paperwork, the overdue bills, the loan agreement. Everything. Then I wrote a neat little summary, almost like a case file, laying out how my dad had stolen from me and buried himself in shady debt. Next, I created an email draft addressed to 3 places: the State Licensing Board for Contractors, the Better Business Bureau, and his biggest client, the one he bragged about keeping happy for years. I didn't hit send. Not yet. But just knowing it was there, ready to launch, gave me power. Meanwhile, I started spreading little seeds outside the family. At the diner, I mentioned to a few regulars that my dad's company was having a rough time. At school, when someone asked how things were at home, I let out a sigh and said, "Honestly, it's bad. He's drowning in debt." People love gossip, and I knew word would travel. But the real weapon was patience. I wasn't going to expose him all at once. That would be too easy. I wanted him to feel the walls closing in slowly, like the world itself was turning against him. At home, I kept playing the quiet daughter role. I smiled at Kelly when she bragged about her car. I nodded at my mom when she pretended nothing was wrong. But inside, I was pulling strings none of them could see. And every night, I opened that email draft, reread it, and thought about the moment I would finally press send. Because when I did, his reputation, his business, and his pride would all go up in flames. And I'd be the one holding the match. It didn't take long for the whispers to start circling back. One night, I was wiping down counters at the diner when I overheard 2 guys at a booth talking. "You hear about that contractor, Mark?" one of them said, my dad's name. "Word is he's drowning in debt. Can't pay his guys on time. The other chuckled. Figures. Always knew he was full of it. Drives around like a big shot, but probably can't keep the lights on. I kept my head down, pretending not to listen, but inside I felt a rush of satisfaction. The seeds were sprouting. A few days later, I came home to find my dad in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp and defensive. I don't know who's been talking, he snapped. My business is fine. Don't believe every rumor you hear. When he hung up, he saw me standing there. For a second, our eyes locked, and I swear he knew. He didn't say anything, but the suspicion was all over his face. The pressure was mounting. He started snapping at my mom for little things, like leaving lights on or spending too much on groceries. Kelly noticed too. Dad's losing it, she whispered to me one afternoon, rolling her eyes. He's acting like the world's ending. I just smiled and said, maybe it is. At night, I'd hear him pacing the living room, muttering to himself, sometimes making frantic calls. He was unraveling, exactly the way I wanted. The strong, untouchable man who had slapped me into silence was now a paranoid wreck, looking over his shoulder, unsure of who was talking or what might come next. And the beauty of it? I hadn't even pressed send on that email. Not yet. This was only the beginning. Up until then, I'd only been planting rumors and letting his own mess work against him. But I knew it was time to turn up the heat. I wanted to see him sweat, not just at home, but in the one place he cared about most, his business. So I took the next step. One afternoon, while on my break at the diner, I pulled out my phone and opened the email draft I'd been holding on to. I didn't send it to everyone yet. No, I wanted precision. I chose one target, his biggest client, the company he bragged about servicing for years. In the email, I didn't spill everything. I just attached a photo of the foreclosure notice with a short message. Thought you should know the man you're doing business with isn't financially stable. Might want to double-check before trusting him with major contracts. No name. No signature. Just a tip from a concerned source. I hit send. The fallout was almost immediate. 2 days later, my dad came home furious, slamming his keys on the counter. They pulled the damn contract, he shouted. My mom froze by the sink, Kelly jumped, and I calmly kept flipping through my textbook at the table. What happened? My mom asked carefully. They said they heard things about me, about the business. Bullshit rumors. Somebody's out there trying to ruin me. His face was red, his hands shaking. I kept my eyes on the page, biting the inside of my cheek to hide my smile. That night, I heard him arguing with my mom again. His voice was raw, panicked. If I can't land another contract soon, we're finished. Do you get that? Finished. Kelly cried, asking if we were going to lose the house. My mom tried to calm everyone down. And me? I just sat in my room, listening through the thin walls, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks, power. He was finally getting a taste of what he'd put me through, helpless, cornered, afraid. And I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. By the next week, the cracks in my dad's facade had split wide open. He wasn't the same man anymore. The tough, controlling father who used to slam his fist on the table and demand obedience had been replaced by someone frantic, paranoid, and angry at everyone around him. It started small. He snapped at my mom over dinner for breathing too loud. He accused Kelly of wasting gas driving her friends around, yelling that she had no idea how hard it was to keep this family afloat. But it didn't stop there. One night, I came home from work to find him in the living room with a bottle of whiskey on the table, half gone. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt wrinkled, and he was muttering to himself. When he saw me, he pointed his finger like it was a weapon. You, he slurred. You're behind this. You think I don't know? My heart skipped, but I kept my face calm. Behind what? The rumors. The contract's pulling out. Someone's been talking. Someone's been trying to ruin me. His hand slammed against the table, rattling the glass. And it started after you got bitter about that damn money. I tilted my head, meeting his glare. Funny. You ruin yourself, and somehow it's my fault? His face twisted with rage. For a second, I thought he might hit me again, but my mom rushed in, grabbing his arm. Mark, stop. You're scaring her. I should be scared, I said quietly, staring him down. You've got loan sharks breathing down your neck, the bank ready to take the house, and clients walking away. Tell me, Dad, how much longer do you think you can keep this act up? His jaw worked, but no words came out. Just silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Then he stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. My mom burst into tears. Kelly sat frozen, clutching her phone like it was her lifeline. And me? I just stood there, calm, collected, almost cold. Because in that moment, I realized the truth. He wasn't in control anymore. I was. By then, my dad was barely holding himself together. The business was crumbling, the house was on the verge of being taken, and the loan shark's shadow seemed to hang over him every time he stepped out the door. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I wanted the final blow to be public. Permanent. Something he could never recover from. So, one Saturday morning, while the house was quiet, I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder I'd been building for weeks. Photos of overdue bills. The foreclosure notice. The half-filled bankruptcy forms. And, of course, the signed loan agreement with the shady lender. Piece by piece, I compiled them into one neat, organized package. Then I wrote a cover email. Attached is documentation proving that contractor Mark, last name, is financially insolvent, under investigation by creditors, and tied to private predatory lending. Consider carefully before hiring him or trusting his services. I send it to every client listed on his business website. I send it to the state licensing board. And finally, I send it to the local newspaper. When I hit send, my hands didn't even shake. The fallout was nuclear. Within days, his phone wouldn't stop ringing, not with business inquiries, but with cancellations. Clients pulled contracts, suppliers cut him off, and word spread faster than fire. People who once shook his hand in public now crossed the street to avoid him. And then came the article. A full piece in the local paper about his shady financial dealings, citing anonymous sources and leaked documents. I read it 3 times, savoring every line. At home, he was a ghost of himself. Silent, hollow-eyed, barely speaking. My mom tried to keep the family together, but the tension was suffocating. Kelly didn't brag about her car anymore, she barely left her room. And me? I carried myself lighter than I had in months. For the first time since the slap, I felt free. But I wasn't celebrating yet. Because the final stage wasn't just about destroying his reputation. It was about making sure he knew exactly who had done it. I waited until the house was as quiet and broken as he had made me feel that night when he stole from me and slapped me into silence. It was late, close to midnight. My mom had gone to bed early, her face worn with exhaustion. Kelly was holed up in her room, blasting music through her headphones to drown out reality. And my dad sat alone at the kitchen table, the same spot where this had all started, staring at nothing with a half-empty bottle in front of him. I walked in slowly, pulling out a chair across from him. For a moment, he didn't even notice me. Then his eyes lifted, bloodshot and tired. "You happy now?" he rasped. His voice was low, almost defeated. "You got what you wanted. Everyone knows. I'm ruined." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Not yet. But close." His jaw tightened. "Why?" he asked. Not angry this time, just hollow. "Why would you do this to your own father?" I held his gaze, my voice steady. "Because you stole from me. Because you treated me like I didn't matter. You took my savings, slapped me across the face, and thought I'd just stay quiet. You made me feel small. And I'm not small, Dad. Not anymore. For the first time, he didn't have an answer. No shouting, no excuses, no threats. Just silence. I stood, pushing my chair back slowly. I want you to remember this moment. Every contract you lost. Every whisper behind your back. Every headline. All of it traces back to one choice you made. His eyes darkened, searching mine, almost begging me not to say it. But I did. It was me. I did it. And I don't regret a damn thing. I turned and walked toward the door, my footsteps steady, my chest light. He didn't follow. He didn't shout. He just sat there, broken, with the weight of his own destruction pressing down on him. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I looked up at the sky and breathed in deep. For the first time in years, I felt free, not just from him, but from the shadow of his control. I hadn't just gotten revenge. I had taken back my power. And that, to me, was worth far more than $30,000.